Welcome to Ordinary to Badass, episode number 322. In this episode, I'm going to be making a confession. Yep, got to confess about something I did. And yeah, we're going to get into it. I'm going to tell you about a lie that I've been telling or that I've been living. So we'll get into that. But before we do, let me apologize to you. I feel like crap. I I feel good, but I feel crappy that I haven't shown up for you the past couple weeks. I kind of took a podcast break, a social media break. I just needed to be re-energized, refueled. I did go to Ireland, which was super fun. But sometimes you just need a creative break or need to change it up a little bit. But what I don't like is that I haven't been here for you. So for that, I am sorry. What I will say is I always want to put out the best content possible. So I'm often reevaluating, seeing where I can tweak, if I should do something different with Ordinary to Badass as a business, also just with the podcast. I want to put out the best for you. And one of the things that came to me is you and me, we don't have enough one-on-one conversations. And so I want to be having more conversations with you. And I've kind of gotten into a habit of just having interview guests most of the time. And I want to make sure that you and I are having our one-on-one time. And so there will be more episodes with just like solo episodes where we're talking, getting into it. And throughout this process, I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear what you like, what you don't like. And I'm doing some things a little bit differently, and you'll see kind of as it plays out. But I'm just experimenting, just trying different things, seeing what works, seeing what you guys like, what works for me creatively, all of the things. But I am super excited for where things are going. But I do want to apologize for not showing up the past couple of weeks because you know what? Like, consistency is important, right? Showing up is important. And I get that. So sorry for that. And don't plan on having any more breaks anytime soon. Okay, with that, let's get to the episode.
Be confident, be bold, be authentic, but don't forget to take action. This is Ordinary to Badass, where our stories empower women to step into the spotlight of their own lives and pursue what they're truly passionate about. It's time to step into the arena and become more than just extraordinary. It's time to become a badass with your host, Marie Sonneman.
Welcome to Ordinary to Badass. Whether you're ordinary or badass, I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk all about vulnerability and why it's so badass. And then I'm calling myself out. I guess it's not, and then also I'm calling myself out because I haven't been completely honest with you. I've been leading a life full of lies. So let me tell you, let me make the confession, get it off my chest. And that is that I haven't been very open with you. I haven't been very vulnerable with you. And that sucks. I don't like that. But it's just something in my personality, and I've never been super open or super vulnerable where I think that I'm like, oh, all in, being super vulnerable right now. To somebody else, they're like, not at all. So it is a work in progress. I know with me being a liar over here, I can just see you in your head, like going back to your childhood self, wanting to be like, liar, liar, pants on fire. Just me? I don't know. Okay. But you know what? It happens. It happens where we get in a habit of something and then it's super hard to make a change. It's super hard to get out of that habit, even when you recognize that it's not in your best interest. Even though I recognize that it is badass to be vulnerable, it is still very hard for me to be vulnerable, to be open with my emotions, all of those things. Definitely something that I struggle with, and I've been working on it the last couple of years. So it's a work in progress. Now, for me, like I work in law enforcement. So on the law enforcement side, you don't need to show emotion, right? If it's a dangerous situation, you got to be focused and you can't be all emotional. So that serves me for that side of my life, but it doesn't necessarily serve me for the podcast or for my business, Ordinary to Badass, right? It doesn't necessarily serve me there. So I got to kind of figure out, kind of navigate these waters of learning to be more open and more vulnerable. Anybody else? If you can relate to this, I want to know. I want to see if I'm the only one that's like this, or if there are other people. Sometimes it's maybe something you picked up from work. Sometimes it's something you did from childhood. I feel like I've been like this all my life. But I want to know or I want to hear from you. Are you like this? Are you really emotional, or are you not emotional, not great at showing your emotions or your vulnerability? So yeah, definitely want to hear from you on that one. See if I'm alone on this one. Okay. So you know what? I see this vulnerability in other people and how they're able to do it. And I love it. Like when it's appropriate, right? I'm not saying just be vulnerable all the time, or if there's somebody that's going to be not like unsupportive of you, okay, don't share your emotions with them, or don't tell them your deep, dark secrets, right? But when you're in a safe place, or once maybe the wound has healed a little bit and you're able to talk about it more, fine, share it. So, just knowing the boundaries, or when you're in a safe place versus where you're not. But I have been recognizing lately of different mentors that have been great at being vulnerable. I've been in a mastermind group. And if you don't know what a mastermind group is, it's usually a group of people who have one common goal. And the leader of the mastermind has usually already accomplished that goal. So I was in Ray Edwards's community, and he is a copywriter. Pretty much copywriting is like words that sell. And so that's what he does for a living, is copywriting. And he was telling our mastermind group, so a small, intimate group of people, in this case, entrepreneurs, right? And he was telling us about his struggle with Parkinson's, and that it was really hard on him. It was draining his energy, and really it almost ended his life. But he was sharing this with us and telling us how hard it was, and that he just was having a tough time dealing with it. But then he also said, you know what? I am considering getting a surgery on my brain, and it's called deep stimulation surgery. And that's to help. It doesn't cure Parkinson's, but it can take care of the symptoms for a period of years. And so like you might not have the shaking. And so he was telling us in this, and it's like, ooh, that's really scary, right? And he was telling us this as he was going through this. And so it let us in. It helped us to be able to support him and to tell him, like, we have your back. We're here for you, all the things. If he hadn't have told us, we couldn't be there to support him, right? And then, of course, I'm telling you this now because he had the surgery. Everything turned out well. He has also now shared the story publicly. So I'm not airing out any of his dirty laundry, right? He has shared the story publicly. But I really valued that he was willing to share that story, whether it be with our mastermind or be with the public. It's hard to share those things. And I think he waited until he was out of the woods, right? When he wasn't feeling so down on life, when he wasn't feeling, or he wasn't preparing for the surgery. It was after the surgery. And so it takes a lot to be able to share that stuff and open up about that stuff, because you could get haters or made fun of. You just don't know what people's reactions will be. And I'm not telling you that you have to announce this stuff to the world, but you could just be more open and vulnerable with people in your life in general, right? So it's kind of take it for what it's worth for what you do in your life. If you're an artist, okay, maybe you share it on social media. I don't know, up to you, but sharing your story with more people sometimes can definitely help other people to relate to you. And it's kind of funny, the simple things that we relate to each other on, that we don't even realize. Recently, I mentioned I went to Ireland, and it was funny because my mom was like, she would see people in Ireland with like a Seattle Mariners hat on, or Notre Dame. They had Notre Dame gear. So then she'd be like, Notre Dame or Mariners, and shout them out and start a conversation with these people. Like, really, it's not as hard as we sometimes think it is to start a conversation, right? But we have a lot of commonalities with people. So whether it's something traumatic or just shared things that we've experienced in life, that automatically builds a connection with people. It builds a bridge, right? So I think we forget that sometimes. I think we forget that our shared experiences connect us to other people. So if you have struggled with something in the past and overcome it, maybe you could help somebody else overcome that very thing. Or you could meet a new friend who's went through the same type of thing. It's just another connection. Okay, and then another mentor I had, I'll share this story. Not going to go into detail about it. Not sure that it's been made public yet. But I had another mentor that was going through a health scare, and she was vulnerable enough to share with me, and then she was vulnerable enough to share with a group, and that automatically built a connection. Automatically made me trust her more, right? And it is hard to do this. It's not easy. It's not something, if you're not practiced at it, it's going to take some work. Take it from me. So yeah, that mentor, she shared her journey, but guess what? She was also very positive. And it shocked me, her positivity, and how she was able to remain that steadfast and that positive during a potentially dark time, right? And it turned out being okay, or being good for her, like the end result, but it was still scary. And then, like, to me, that says something. That says something about your character. When the going gets tough, when things are freaking hard, and you're still positive, you're still going, you're still grinding, you're still doing the things that you love, you don't let that stop you. Like, yes, don't get me wrong, you are going to take time to grieve, to cry, to be upset, whatever. We're human. We're going to feel these emotions, but on a routine daily basis, she made it her intention to be positive. And that is badass. But also it told me, like, okay, this is possible for you. If you're going through hard, uncertain times, you can still be positive. You can still, like, be ticked off and angry and upset when you get the news, but then move on and choose, because it's a choice, right? To be positive, to think that it's possible. So she helped me realize that it's possible. And that was just how she reacted to her news, right? How she reacted to the health scare, and what she did between the time that she had the health scare and the month or so that she found out, that she was okay. So, like, that told me, yeah, she's a total badass. So when you're going through these hard things, you build connection, and you really get to know other people. Other people get to know you better. But if you're like me and you're on a journey, you're not where you want to be, whether it be with emotions or vulnerability or something else, it is okay that you're not right on track, that you're not where you want to be. It's a journey. So give yourself some grace. It's a journey. And I often think of Bilbo Baggins from The Hobbit. Anybody else watch that? I'll tell you, side note, I did not ever get into Lord of the Rings, but I got into The Hobbit and I really love it. So yeah, some Hobbit references. So Bilbo Baggins from the movie Hobbit, he had to go on a journey. He had to leave the Shire to go on the journey, which meant leaving his comfort zone, leaving his family and his friends and everything he knew for his daily life. And taking that journey, he was uncomfortable. It was dangerous. Like, he probably felt a lot of fear because he didn't know what to expect. He didn't know what was next, but he did it anyway, because that's normal. That's normal to feel fear, to feel scared inside, to not know what's next, but you push past it anyway. So just because you're feeling the fear, just because you're feeling the uncertainty, just because it's a little bit scared to get out of your comfort zone, it's scary to be vulnerable, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It's just hard to start. So start with me, work on it with me. If that's your issue, to each our own, but there is value in it for sure. So you know what? I'm coming to realize that it may be valuable for you, for me, for us to adopt this being a little bit more vulnerable. I think in this day and age, it's so easy to cut off our emotions, turn to alcohol, turn to TV, turn to video games, whatever your thing is. It's so easy to turn to things that are going to mute us or not mute us. Like they just take away some of your emotion, or you don't have to feel your emotion. So social media would be one of those things too, right? And we don't want to be emotionless. We don't want to be ice cold or the ice queen like Elsa. Maybe I am, but I'm working. So remember, give yourself some grace. You got this. We're working through this together. And you know what? Speaking of grace, I recently was able to do that. I was recently able to give myself some grace. I had been doing this 75 hard and actually did it for like 95 days and went to Ireland and completely stopped. Like I was eating food that was not healthy or eating sugar where I hadn't been eating sugar before. And I just said, Marie, give yourself some grace. You can do this. Like you're allowed to have sugar, right? You're allowed to go over the top once in a while. And so somehow, for some reason, I was able to give myself grace in that moment. And I'll tell you, that doesn't happen often, right? Where you're just like, okay, this is okay for now, doesn't have to be forever. So try to incorporate that. I think that the more that we learn to give ourselves grace, the more likely you are to do the same thing next time and not be so stinking hard on yourself. Because even badasses take breaks. Even badasses fall off track. Even badasses stop once in a while, right? And that's okay. It's just getting back on track after. Whatever your goal is, whatever you're moving towards, whatever you want more of in your life, work towards those things. And if you fall off, if you pause, take a break, cool. That's fine. That doesn't make you any less of a badass. Okay. So I just want treat ourselves right. Make sure to give yourself grace. That is huge. And since we're talking a little bit about vulnerability, I'm going to tell you a little of the things that have been going on with me. Just so you know kind of where I'm coming from, what's going on. I'll say in the last 3 years, I've had a ton of anxiety. And I've had to learn to try to cope with that. And I'll probably do an episode about that at some point. How you can cope with your anxiety or the things that I've learned that could help you too. And I've also gained a lot of weight in the past couple of years. Probably just stress, right? I know there was a pandemic going on. And I've been spending way more money than I should spend, been drinking more than I should drink. Like, you just start to get in a habit like, okay, well, every night at dinner, I'm going to have a glass of wine. And then it just becomes the new normal, the new thing. So these are things that I have done. And I didn't like that I got into those habits, or I didn't like that I was doing those things, but it happened. And which, by the way, going back, because I forgot to mention, I mentioned 75 Hard. I didn't really tell you what it was. 75 Hard is a program, and it has like, okay, you go for 75 days and you follow a certain diet. You read 10 pages of a nonfiction book. I always have to go in my head, nonfiction, fiction. So a book, something true, nonfiction. And then you also have to do 2 workouts a day for 45 minutes each. and one has to be outdoors. So there's a few other stipulations or things that you have to do, like, oh, drink a gallon of water a day, that kind of thing. I'll do a post about that. Maybe the next couple episodes, I'll do a post about that or a podcast about that, talking about 75 hard and how sometimes extreme is better or easier than hard. So we'll get into that later. Don't worry about that right now. But yeah, we'll talk about those more. Today, what I want to talk about, 3 things that have helped me to be more vulnerable, 3 things that can help you to be more vulnerable. I'm assuming there's got to be somebody else out there like me who needs to show more emotion, be more vulnerable in your life. So, number 1, awareness. So, oftentimes, just being aware of your behavior is a huge step forward. So, at times where I'm not very emotional, I'm not very vulnerable, or I'm not showing it on the outward appearance, then recognize it. Recognize, like, oh, I see I could be vulnerable here, but I'm choosing not to. You don't have to change overnight, right? But just being aware of it, and that is taking steps forward. Or you're like, oh, isn't that interesting that I didn't feel safe crying here? Why is that? Because sometimes I feel like crying, but I hold myself back because I want to be tough and I don't want to cry. So like, just reflect on it. Oh, I see that I felt that, but I didn't feel safe doing it. Why is that? What did I think would happen? Have these people I'm around judged me before? So just noticing, being aware, and just recognizing when these situations pop up where you don't feel safe to be vulnerable or emotional. And noticing those times where you want to cry or you want to be happy even, but you don't feel safe or okay to do so. So I think just dig into it a little bit more. Just try to understand it. Be curious, right? One of the books that I read that was super helpful on this is The Untethered Soul. And I resisted reading this book for so long. People kept recommending it to me. I'm like, no. And I just couldn't get myself to read it. I think I even checked it out from the library a couple times. I don't even think I opened through the first page. And now I love it. But yeah, I read it. I fell in love. One of the quotes from that book was, the more you are willing to just let the world be something you're aware of, the more let me reread that. The more you are willing to just let the world be something you are aware of, the more it will let you be who you are. Be aware of the world, and you can be more of you. Who doesn't want that, right? So I think just taking time to notice your behaviors, notice the way things are popping up, notice when you're not willing to experience those emotions or show emotion, to outwardly feel how you feel inside. Just notice them. That's it. Easy peasy. Not necessarily, but see, it sounds easy. It's just, again, a journey, something you work on over time. And the more you start to notice it and be aware of things, then it'll help you for the next time. Okay. Number 2, embracing your flaws. How important is it to embrace our flaws? So important. I think that this doesn't happen nearly enough, and we're constantly trying to cover up our flaws, which is crazy. Hashtag Flossom. Somebody came up with that for a reason, right? Because it's awesome to show your flaws, but we just don't do it, especially not in the social media world. When you look on social media, you think everybody's life is perfection. Their life is perfect. They have it easy. It's only me that is struggling. That's just not true. Everybody is struggling. Everybody has their own struggles. Maybe it's not every day, but people do have their struggles. And it's important that we see that. Now, I heard this story, and actually I heard it on the Creative Pep Talk podcast. Love that podcast. That was something I was listening to get me more creatively energized. So go listen to the Creative Pep Talk podcast. So good. I think everybody's creative, and I denied it forever, but I think we all are. It's just a matter of tapping into it, right? So anyway, he was talking about Boyz II Men. Anybody else like Boyz II Men when they were growing up? I know I did, but in one of the songs for Boyz II Men, Wanya was singing and his voice cracked. So he finished and then he said, okay, we're good. Let's re-record. And then Babyface, who's a songwriter, singer, record producer, he was like, oh, no, we're keeping that in. What? Why would we keep that in? He's like, because it's real. It's not perfect. So they kept it in the final edit of the song because that's real. That's legit. Whose voice hasn't cracked? I mean, I feel like my voice cracks more than like just singing a basic song because I can't sing. It cracks a lot, but that's okay. But it's like, leave it in. Instead of trying to fix everything and make it look like everything is perfect, leave it in. Now, I'll tell you, I understand this. I understand why Wanya was like, cut it out. Let's redo it. Let's hit this again. Because I did that all the time with the podcast. When I first started this podcast, it's like I edited so much out, any little like that, or like if somebody took a deep breath, edit, like cut those out because I wanted the listener to have a perfect listening experience. And I didn't want people clearing their throat in front of you or taking deep breaths. I just thought it distracted from the audio. And also when you're just listening audio, sometimes things are even more clear, like you hear it even more as opposed to if you were watching a video of something. So I edited it out and I just thought that was better. But actually, it's not better. People want real. We don't want perfect. Perfect is boring. So stop boring me. I kid. But really, perfect is boring. So why are we always striving to like be perfect or think we have to put off this image that we are perfect? Going to sleep over here. So embrace your flaws. Forget all this perfectionism. I think it's taught. I think women especially learn it from a young age, but we need to realize it's boring. I don't want any more of it. Let's just embrace who we are and show a little bit more of our flaws. Okay, number 3, asking for help. This one is huge. It is so hard to ask for help. And I think especially for women, it's kind of a thing where we think we have to do it all ourselves. We have to take it all on, put it all on our shoulders. Now, there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's so true. We can go so much further if we're using the help of other people, if we have other people to push us forward, right? So don't think you got to take it all on your shoulders, that you have to do it all yourself, because that's ridiculous. It's outlandish. Like, I don't even know why we do it. And I say we, because I do it too, for sure. But we don't have to always hold a million different plates in there at one time and just hope everything doesn't come crashing down. It takes a toll on us when we keep trying to do all the things. So don't do it all. And I'll tell you, I struggle asking for help. So I am here with you, alongside of you, learning. But I do realize that I do realize why we let people help us out, or the value of it. So let me ask you, how do you feel when you help somebody else out? Pretty darn good, right? I know I feel good. And would you want to take away that feeling from somebody else? You're stealing from your family and your friends by not allowing them to help you. You're stealing their joy. It feels good to be able to do something for someone, especially somebody that doesn't ask for help. So let's stop stealing from the people we love. and let them help us out. Let them feel the joy. Give them a chance to do things for you. You're not just helping yourself out, but you're helping them to feel joy, right? That's part of a friendship. That's part of a relationship. It's give and take. I do stuff for you. You do stuff for me, right? But if you're shutting it all off, then you're not getting help. And sometimes we even complain about that. Like, I get no help. Well, we don't allow it. So ask for help. And sometimes, you know what? Just ease yourself into it. It doesn't have to be hardcore. It's just, nope, ease yourself into it. Ask for help in the smallest way. If you're not used to asking for it, just think of the smallest thing you can ask for help for and do that. That's it. And then I think the more you get used to asking for the small things, it'll get a little bit easier each and every time. Now, there's a book that I would highly recommend. It's by an author I love, Benjamin Hardy, and it's called Who, Not How. And this book really teaches you that you can ask people for help. Like, who can help you versus how can I get this done by myself? So ask yourself, who can help me accomplish this? Instead of how can I get this done? And if you're finding the right people in your life, if you're finding the right who's, then it's going to free up some time in your life. Okay. I got to divert for a second to tell you the worst joke ever. And it popped in my head when I said who's. So when I was in school, there was a joke. Somebody in our class called you an owl. And they'd usually respond, who? Trying to find out who called him an owl. And then they sounded like an owl. Okay. Yeah. Use that one if you want. Okay. So take your time, start asking people for help. Don't take it all on your shoulders. You're only one person, and don't steal your friends, your family, don't steal their joy. Okay. So we have a call to badassery this week. It's to embrace your badassery through vulnerability. So this week, I'm going to challenge you to do one of the three things that we talked about in this episode. 1, awareness. Be more aware. 2, to embrace your flaws. 3 is to ask for help. Perfection is crap. Perfection is not the goal ever. We need to get that in our head, right? So even if you were just aware that you want to be more vulnerable this week, that's a win. And if you don't want to say vulnerable, aware of something else. Like, what do you want awareness around? What do you want to be more of? Okay, have more awareness around that. It doesn't have to be vulnerability specifically. But all I'm asking here is for you to dip your toes in the water with one of those three things. Dip your toe in the water, try it out a little bit, and don't punish yourself. Don't talk down to yourself. If you don't get there, you're a badass. We are on a journey. We're taking this one step at a time. You, my friend, you got this. I know it. Just remember, when you're opening yourself up more, you're like a flower, right? You're blossoming, you're growing. And when you're closing yourself down, then it's like you're wilting inside, you're dying inside for closing yourself off to what is possible. So let's go on this journey of being a little bit more open together. And I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what you thought of this episode. If you can at all relate, hit me up on Instagram at Ordinary to Badass. You can take a screenshot of this episode and throw it in your stories, or you know what? Just DM me the screenshot of the episode and then tell me your comments. Again, it means the world to me when you take the time to send me a message and give me a little feedback, right? Because it's so important. So be vulnerable here. Again, even if it's just dipping your toe in the water, be vulnerable, share with me. Okay. Now, I'm going to say some of my creative or some of my references for this episode would be Andy J Pizza, not his real last name, but that's what he goes by. I think he's Andy J Pizza on Instagram, and Ray Edwards, who we spoke about. And so you can talk or check out Andy J. Pizza's podcast episode or podcast, and that is Creative Pep Talk. Ray Edwards also has a podcast called the Ray Edwards Podcast. So you can check those out. Those were some of my inspirations for today's episode. And with that, we'll end the show. To all the badass women out there staying in the arena, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, own it and get after it.
Now that you've listened to this episode of Ordinary to Badass, we want to hear from you. Go to our website, ordinarytobadass.com/podcast, and submit your own experience on how you took your life from ordinary to badass and get the chance to be on a future Spotlight episode of the show. That's ordinarytobadass.com/podcast. While you're waiting for the next episode of the show, wipe off the sweat, dust off the dirt, and get back in the arena.